I was one of the first female to lead an air defense artillery platoon. 15, 16 year, I want to say, mark that, I felt like I was losing my husband. And I saw my own selfishness. And she's going to leave my dad, and we're never going to see him again. All I could see was my little boy telling his teacher that.
Hey, we can change the world. Let's go. We can do it. Matter of fact, we will. Yes, this world bleeding in my God can heal. Yes, every time when I'm out in the field, the heartbeat from the people saying, "Oh, so real." Let's go. Man, we can change the world. We can. Got to do it for the boys and girls. The future. God has a sentence for your life. What's that? He sends you out to spread light. So we can change the world. Yes, we can change the world. We will. We can change the world. Yeah. We can change the world. That's right. We can change the world. We will. We can change the world. Yes, we can change the world. Hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Your Story right here on Testimony House, where we tell the story inside of God's people out in the world. I'm so excited to introduce all of you guys to Janet Page Smith, who's recently written a book called God, Mount Fuji, and Sweet Tea. She has a personal mission to help married couples stay together, and so she's going to use her own testimony and her story to encourage people both through her book and on this show today. Janet, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, John, and thank you so much for having me on the show tonight.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us on the program today. We're going to jump right into things. You have a mission to help people who are dealing with divorce. I imagine you've been married for a long time. You're going to talk to us about that. But I want to know what life was like before you started getting the thoughts in your head about wanting to leave the marriage. Talk to us about the good times of your marriage and your family makeup.
John, I am what they call an Army brat. I was born in the military, Fort Monterey, California, Fort Ord. My father was a career man. We traveled all over the country with him. And I had a good upbringing, very adventurous man. There was no place that he wouldn't go. We didn't just stay cooped up on the military base. One place in particular was Alaska. I had a very adventurous childhood and actually went to 4 or 5 different high schools. My father retired in Columbus, Georgia, and from there I graduated from high school and attended the University of Georgia. At that particular time, had no idea of all the little small communities and towns and how rural Georgia is. But with all of that, the University of Georgia was like a mini city for me. So I was able to assimilate well there. And that's where I met my country boy. That's where I met my husband. And in my senior year, I received a commission. I joined ROTC. And so my professor of military science called me in and he said, hey, why don't you join the military and, become an officer and do 3 years and then get out. And I was like, that's not bad. I'm familiar with that and I can do that. And well, as the Lord would have it, I signed the contract and it wasn't 2 weeks later, I met my husband. Mm. So not only did I sign up, he signed up with me as my spouse, as a military spouse. And our first duty assignment was air defense artillery. I was an air defense artillery officer, and I'm going to tell you this too, John. That's a combat arms.
Yeah.
That's a combat arms. I was one of the first female to lead an air defense artillery platoon. And at that time, women didn't the kind of roles that they do now, all these leadership roles. Women are CEOs of companies and lead men, and men are comfortable with them. They weren't very comfortable with me. being their platoon leader. So I had to just go into it. I wasn't a praying girl at that particular time, knew of Jesus, but I just had to go in there with the determination, look, guys, you're not going to run me out. Now, while I'm at work trying to lead men,
Hmm.
I've left the husband at home, um, a newlywed. We're newlyweds, John. So he's finding odd jobs. He's looking for jobs while I'm gone, and he finally landed a job. So we did that for 12 years, not just at Fort Bliss. We left there and we went overseas, but it was overseas in Germany. With I was with the Third Infantry Division, and we had our baby. That it was time for uh, my husband and I, Mark and I, said, you know what, time's up. I had done my fulfilled my commitment, and it was time to go home. And at that particular time, home was a farm that he had grown up on all of his life, something that I was totally unfamiliar with. Prior to the breakdown in our marriage, my husband was very supportive of me. He was the first Mr. Mom. We decided after baby number two, transporting kids to daycare centers, other people's homes, while he had worked long hours and I worked long hours. It just wasn't worth that, doing that anymore. So he stayed at home with the boys. So when I left the military and we came back to the small town in Georgia, where he was born, reared, and raised, I became now full time wife and full time mother and full time school teacher. And uh, civilian life, believe it or not, coming from a military background, I was in culture shock, just total
Hmm.
culture shock. So that's where the breakdown, just a mini bio on me, that's when the
Yeah.
trouble started.
Well, I love the description here. You're an army brat, to use your term. Moving around the country. You end up in Alaska, which I have to assume is a little more rural than Georgia, but maybe not in terms of what it looks like as far as the number of people are around your life. But you have this in your
Right.
blood, and you end up doing it in your own life, serving in the
Yes.
military. You bring your husband alone, Mark, and he's here with you. You got two boys, and you end up having three boys, and you end up married for 40 years. But as you said, this culture shock happened, and this is where we sort of get on the journey of what God does in your life. Because you mentioned sort of you were a praying girl, you knew who Jesus was, but the breakdown in your marriage starts, and eventually I'm sure there's a story here where God shows up. So tell us about what that was like.
We were close in the military, and a lot of couples, military couples, particular, they, because we move around and we don't have family right there with us all the time. Every time we move to another military base, we're starting all over again. We're, finding homes, finding schools, finding the stores.
Yeah.
We're exploring. When I look back and have hindsight, that's what happened. That we were just too busy to get bogged down with the busyness of life, so to speak, where you can start taking your spouse for granted. But the biggest rift for me, John, was while we were traveling in the military, we didn't have a home church. I pulled duties on Sundays. And when I didn't pull duty on Sundays, we wanted to go exploring. I wanted to spend time with my family.
Sure.
Like I said before, I knew of Jesus. We carried the Bible around. We hit and missed with church, but that wasn't the focus in our marriage.
Yeah.
I was very excited about moving here. We built our dream home.
Hmm.
Um, I get to raise my children in one place. Um, John, if you've never lived in a small town, everyone knows you. They
Yeah.
know you. They knew me before I got there. Okay. I became a school teacher. I wanted to teach because of my children and the amount of time I'd spent away from them. But again, like I said, the breakdown came when, after 12 years, it was, we'd been married 12 years when we came back to the farm. And it was around about that uh, 15, 16 year, I want to say, mark that, I felt like I was losing my husband.
Mm,
Um, we weren't going to church faithfully, but we started arguing.
mm,
It's just the little things. It seemed like he spent more time on the farm and with friends, and I had a total disconnect from the military. The closest, and I mentioned this in God Now, Fuji, and Sweet Tea, the closest thing the people in this community wanted to be close to that had anything with the military were the monuments in the town square from World War One and World War Two. They weren't used to veterans. They weren't, especially a female veteran.
yeah.
And on Sundays, what most families did on Sundays, they go to mom's house and their grandmother's house and brothers and sisters and people who had grown up from kindergarten. They would go and have Sunday dinner, or if there were gatherings, they would spend birthday party at each other's home. Everybody knew everyone but
Yeah.
me. That's the way
Mm,
it felt.
mm,
I felt left out. And my husband just, he couldn't quite understand why I felt so left out. And then I thought about it. I said, well, you know what? He didn't grow up in the military. I saw my grandmother maybe once a year or once every 2 years, and that's when we were PCS in permanent change of station. And I didn't know my cousins.
mm,
Uh, I didn't, cause we didn't flock together on Christmas and holidays like that. So I just, there went the breakdown right
yeah.
there. And girls, what we do, the first thing we want to do is we want to call and tell our other girlfriends about our troubles, which they really can't help. They're our friends. They want to give us, the guy's always the bad guy. Then we want to call our mothers, which again, mine was ready to pack up and everything I had and leave, help me leave town.
Oh no.
So my moment of awakening was my aunt had given me a Bible, and that Bible had traveled with me overseas to Germany, Fort Bliss, Texas, Fort Gordon. Everywhere I went, that Bible had traveled with me. I actually went through the Bible and I wanted to find where it says it was okay for me to divorce. Well, where can I find that? I mean, I just started turning the pages. I just couldn't find one. I
Hmm.
couldn't not legitimate reason in the Bible. And that's when I started reading what God's design for marriage was supposed to be.
Wow.
I wasn't equipped with that. When you're military, you come up with a game plan, you have a mission, and my mission was let me find out what is my purpose, what is my role, how can I stay in this marriage where there's just conflict all the time and a conflict that is affecting my children.
We haven't had many testimonies of someone who's come in and is facing something like I wanted to be separate of my spouse, and usually it's some sort of sin issue they're dealing with, and you're not that. You're just walking out of life, and all of a sudden there's this fracture in your marriage. And I love that
Yeah,
the community that you're in and that he's in are two different worlds, right? Like you have this army background and you
yeah,
see things one way, and he's got the rural, close knit family town community in his life, and he sees things his way. But neither one of you are seeking the community with Christ that can help you, mend those bridges a little bit better. At least not right away. And so what you've done is you've sought
Right.
out this community of Christ and said, okay, Lord, I want to come alongside you. I'm inviting you into my life so I can see it from your point of view. And at least you're looking at the Bible and you're like, it doesn't say anything about getting divorced, so I guess that's not a path I can take. So what's my next plan? So now you've got to dive into God's word, I imagine, and it begins to change your life and
Yes.
ultimately leaves you to Japan. Tell us about that.
I started the book of Genesis. I just started there. And as I went through the scriptures and I saw all the mistakes that were made by the matriarchs and the patriarchs in the Bible, and I saw how messed up and tore up they were from the
Yep.
floor up,
Check. Oh.
I was like, yeah, I was like, no, oh my goodness, I can fit right in here. And how many times this word forgiveness,
Mm.
forgiveness, and one of those powerful stories was that one of Joseph. And I had to learn to forgive my husband and start praying for him. Just start praying for him. And in that prayer, I asked God to bring us closer together. And what happened was doors started opening for us. We went up to Washington, D.C., where the Pentagon is located, and my brother in law is there, and they have a museum in the Pentagon. And there was this man in a corner, and he had a booth. He was standing at a booth all by himself. He said, we're interested in teaching with the Department of Defense school system. And I was like, well, I know something about that. Yes, because I had been a Dodge child in Alaska and my two children had gone to Dodd school, but I never knew how those teachers were recruited or how they were brought to the foreign country to teach American children. Immediately, this idea came to me, and wouldn't that be fantastic to pack the kids up and go overseas? So when I told my husband about it, John, and it's in the book, he says, you must be crazy. I
Crazy,
mean,
right?
he literally said, have you lost your mind? We have cows. We have property. It's not like we live in a neighborhood and we can put a for rent sign in the front
Sure,
and
yeah.
leave here. I was just immediately disheartened. You know, I saw this as that opportunity. I continued to pray. I did not give up. Every time we had a conversation, there was tension. Um, I saw what we were doing to our children. I speak of this in the memoir. And by the way, there is dialogue in there, it's conflict. It's not me just talking. Well, so when we got back, I prayed. I'm studying my Bible. I'm praying. And I approached him again about it. And this time he said, okay. And he said, we probably won't get hired anyway. And because at that particular time, and it still is, the hiring process is very competitive for the Department of Defense school teachers. And in fact, the way we made the cut was when I went back to check on her application, I saw this big red sign. Here's God working now. Here's God working. I see this big red notice down at the bottom. All no more applications were accepted. All interviews were closed. And I'm saying to myself, how could they be closed? No one called us, and I know we're qualified. I'm a veteran, you know. So, John, I, in the boldness of the spirit, can you believe it? I emailed the HR person back. It wasn't 10 minutes later. I got the email and the invitation for both
Wow.
of us.
Wow. So you and your husband have these plans, sort of going side by side. I'm not going to Japan. We're going to Japan. I'm praying for you. This is happening, and you guys are still on the same track together. But you have
Yes.
decided that you want to work this out with your husband, and this is the path that you get on. So I assume that you guys make your way over to Japan, and God moves on you and your husband to solidify your marriage in a way that's not possible to where you are able to now, as being married as long as you have and having written this book. You can be an encouragement to other people who are in a tired marriage. Maybe they're thinking of leaving. Maybe they've called all their friends and their moms and to let them know. Maybe they have
Yes.
bags packed at the door more than once or twice. To You can speak into their lives. Tell us about that.
It sounds like happily ever after once we get to Japan.
Yeah.
That's not what happened.
Okay. All
That
right.
is not what happened.
Okay.
He went, but he went kicking and screaming.
Mm.
Okay. So I'm taking this guy from over 30 plus acres, tractors, gardens, and now we're living in a Japanese community where the
Right. Which is small.
houses
Right?
are
Mm-hmm.
right next to everybody's right next to each other. And I write about that experience because I had never been to Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how many cars you're driving on the left. The language is kanji. You're dealing in symbols. You're talking about a culture shock. We're living in a guest house in one room. Okay, we've gone from 2,500 square feet down to here's just imagine, you're already in struggling in a marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
now, at least you can go to the other room, or you go
Yeah.
outside, or my
Right.
husband can go to the barn, or you
Right.
go have you some walk cool town time. Now I've taken everything from him, from us, and we're no cars, two kids. They did have their other room, and we have our room, and that's where we are, face off. It wasn't long before, when we moved out into our Japanese community, where I was thriving. So now I'm back in my comfort zone on that base, and my husband's totally out.
Mm-hmm.
So once we get over there, he's dealing with the homesickness, the culture shock. I have a teenager now who thinks hanging out in Tokyo is fun. That's what he says teenagers do. He starts to mature. Yes, sir. Checked on him one night. He was gone. Um, and then I have a 5-year old who doesn't understand why
Mm-hmm.
he's not at home with his grandparent. When I left, I knew that I was going to have to find a home in the church. And I did, in a little chapel it's called the Chapel of the Good Shepherd, and it's on that Navy base. And that's where I called home. Now, did my husband go with me? No, he didn't.
Tell us how you guys were able to connect, and the story gets better.
Well, what happened is we had a 2 year commitment with the Department of Defense. That's what their contract said, 2 years. You can stay longer if you want to. By this time, my husband's teaching. He's assimilating with the community. I told you he was suffering from homesickness.
Sure.
What happened is I had a colleague, another teacher, and I confided in him. He was actually our mentor, and I told him what was happening with Mark, and he said he's homesick. And he said the only way that you're going to be able to help him is to move back on the Navy base. Now, the Navy base had housing. Uh, and of course, I was living in the Japanese community. I had made friends with my neighbors. I was sightseeing, taking the back roads, the back
Yep.
the back shops, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was shopping on the back backside, place where the tourists don't go.
Tourists don't
That's what
go.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Hmm.
But a colleague is saying, you're going to have to move back on base in order for uh, your husband to make it through this, because he had literally just started staying in the house on the computer online, looking at the hometown news every day he had come home.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh no, no, that's not what I want to do. And he said something to me, John, and it sticks with me, and it should with every married couple. He said, you're going to have to give up something in order to get something. And that resonated with me.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
thought of how much uh, Jesus had given up for me,
Mm.
and that selfishness, selfishness in a marriage is a killer
Yeah.
already. And I saw my own selfishness. I saw that. Through God's word, I saw my own selfishness. And that's when, here we go, picking up a whole family and moving out of the Japanese community back on base. That was when things changed for us.
And I don't want people to miss this, Miss Janet, that what you did was
Yes,
you saw a connection between how Jesus saw each of you and what he did for you and what you should do as a participant of your marriage.
absolutely. Absolutely. And what happened from there, God honored that when I did that, because when I was going to church, what they had was on the back of a bulletin, they had a marriage retreat in Tokyo. So I was sitting in church by myself, and I said, he's never going to go to a marriage retreat. He's not even going to church. What happened is, when we came up for the third year, second year, he was telling everybody he was going home. We were going home.
Yeah.
I was not ready to go home. We were
Mm-hmm.
not ready to go home. We That second year, I was just getting comfortable in the country. Um, we were enjoying our jobs. God's teaching for the Department of Defense. When he found out that my plans were not to go, we had a heated conversation. If you really want to stay another year, he said, I'll stay. He said, but we're going to go to the marriage retreat. And what had happened, John, is I had taken the bulletin and stuck it on our refrigerator. And unbeknownst to me, he had read it. And what they did was they talked to us about God's design for marriage. And John, I want to tell you that was the first time, other than reading it in Ephesians, I
Yeah.
had ever heard that. When we came back from the retreat, the next morning, it was Sunday morning, and when I went to get the boys, they were already up, and I could smell our favorite on Sunday morning pancakes and Southern bacon. I could smell that breakfast was already on. So I went into the kitchen, and my husband was dressed in his slacks and shirt. And I was like, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? And he says, I'm going to church this morning.
I love it so much. I love that it takes you on a tremendous journey to get to a place where God has moved in the life of both you and your spouse. And it's an encouragement to anybody. And again, I want to encourage anybody who wants to go pick up a copy of your book. We're going to put the link in the description. God, Mount Fuji, and Sweet Tea. It sounds like you have chock full stories. You're also a writer for Guidepost magazine. So if anybody wants to follow some of your writings, they can look you up over there, correct?
Oh yes, actually, there's an issue in the. I have a story in the July-June issue about my youngest son, and one thing that I failed to mention, John, is the devastating effect that divorce or when there's conflict in a marriage, it has on children. A lot of times we're so centered, self centered, and wrapped up in our own pain and trying to figure it out and get to change our spouse that we don't see that our children are suffering because they go about playing, we tell them to do, they go to school, but what really touched my heart and made me realize that the mistake to go through with a divorce, the effect it was going to have on my children is
Yeah.
I was in a classroom and one day one of my children started crying. One of my students started crying. And, of course, I said, honey, what's wrong? And my mom's going to leave my dad. And she's going to take my sister and she's going to take me and she's going to leave my dad and we're never going to see him again. All I could see was my little boy telling his teacher that. I
Yeah.
don't care how I've seen parents as a teacher. I taught over 20 something years, John, and I've seen all kinds of combination of what they call sharing the responsibility. I've not seen one work yet. What they don't see is what we see as teachers in the classroom, that it affects the child academically and even socially.
Yeah.
They act out. Where else can they act out? And I do have a chapter in there, one of my favorite. It's one that will make you cry. It's called A Plea for Ryan because he acted out after we had been over there in a couple of years. And again, my focusing on my marriage, I lost track of him.
Yeah.
And that's when our family started our praying together.
Yeah.
Once he got in trouble, we had to start praying for him. And again, I'll leave that chapter. We cannot forget that our children are important. God gave us a responsibility as parents.
These takeaways are incredibly important for us to focus on. So many details that you've shared with us in your testimony today encourage us to know that God's plan for our marriage is different than the plans that we make for ourselves. And that when we look at the lives of the children and separating from them, sometimes that's worse on us than just having to go through the hardship of trying to work it out. And so we want to just encourage anybody who is going through something today, whether it's you have an encouraging testimony, you want to share this with someone, or you want to encourage them to seek this out and seek help, go pick up this book from Janet Smith. I appreciate you for sharing your testimony on the show today, Miss Janet.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I say a mission that comes from the military. I say I'm on a mission, and I want to thank my husband too,
Yeah.
John. I share some intimate moments in our marriage, but I want to thank him because most men wouldn't let their wives share that story
Yes.
of what took place. And and I want to say that we've been back now 10 years. Um, Coming back was very difficult, but we did. I say you don't have to leave the country, um, but if there's some things that you as a couple need to let go of in order to bring you closer to Christ, which ultimately will bring you closer to each other, then you need to let those things go. So thank
Yes.
you for helping me share that mission, John.
You're welcome. I appreciate you so much. Again, the link for the book is down in the description. Miss Janet, we will talk to you around the corner, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Tell Me Your Story. I love Janet's story because it's proof that God takes all of us on a different journey. And for some of us, when we have an encounter with God, you're visibly able to see the change in someone's life, like they're going through some sort of sin issue or they have a physical ailment and they're healed. And sometimes, though, on the journeys that we have in our lives, God is there in the midst of it, trying to change the path that we're on. And for Janet, it was in her marriage. On the outside, you could have looked at her and not known that anything was wrong. She was living a normal life. She was trying to do the things that she wanted to do. And ultimately, when she got into God's word and she realized that God had a plan for her marriage, she shifted her heart towards God, and then also was able to pray and believe that her husband's heart would be turned toward God as well. All of that was able to happen, and now she's able to use her testimony as an encouragement to you who are listening today and anybody who picks up a copy of her book. If today's testimony has been a blessing to you, don't forget to head over to testimonyhouse.org. There you can see all the things that we're doing here at the network, all the shows that we create. We even have a 12-question toolkit quiz where you can take to see where you are at on God's plan for your life. You can partner with us, a one-time gift or a monthly partnership, and be part of the ministry here. Essentially, you get to help us create the content that we're doing multiple times a week here on YouTube. If you want to partner with us by getting a t-shirt or a collectible on our website, or one of our books, our resources, maybe God has a sentence for your life. The last book that I wrote is available on our website, testimonyhouse.org. If you have a testimony you'd like to share with us, email us, info@testimonyhouse.org. Maybe you can be the next person here in the seat on Tell Me Your Story. I want to thank you for watching today, guys. Until next time, we pray you discover a future and a hope for your life today.
We ain't trying to blend in. If you're ready, come on with us, my friends. Come on, we can change the world. Hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
What changes the world? The only thing that ever really changes the world is when somebody gets the idea that love can abound and can be shared.